Single dad signed a marriage contract for his daughter. 3 years later, the CEO broke every rule. You want me to marry you? Graham. Whitaker's voice was steady, but his eyes burned with disbelief. He stood in the center of Carrington Tower's penthouse office, a place so pristine and cold it felt like it belonged in a museum, not in real life. Opposite him, Selene Carrington didn't blink. She simply crossed her arms, her perfectly tailored navy suit hugging her figure like it had been sewn onto her soul. I'm offering you a legal contract, she replied. Not romance, not intimacy. A marriage on paper, 3 years. You'll be compensated generously. Graham let out a soft, humorless laugh. You called me here, out of nowhere, to ask me to marry you. You don't even know me. I know everything I need. To Selene said coolly, You're clean. No scandals, no political affiliations. You have full custody of your daughter. You're emotionally stable, dependable, unremarkable in a good way. Graham flinched slightly at that last word. Unremarkable. He clenched his jaw and looked out the massive window behind her where the whole of Los Angeles sprawled like a broken promise. And why me? He asked, his voice low. Because I need a husband, she said like she was discussing an acquisition. The board has issued an ultimatum. Either I stabilize my public image by marrying, or I risk losing controlling interest in Carrington real estate. And, frankly, I don't trust anyone in my world. I need someone outside. He turned to face her again. And my daughter, she's part of the deal. She can live in the house, attend school on a full scholarship, have access to medical support. You did your research, he cut in. Of course. A long silence stretched between them. The ticking of the minimalist chrome wall clock behind her desk was the only sound. Graham studied her. Selene Carrington, 35, one of the youngest self-made billionaires in America. Ice in her veins, steel in her posture, and not a single crack in the armor. Until now. Because for a flicker of a second, just a blink, he thought he saw something in her eyes. Not desperation, not fear, something quieter. Loneliness. Let me get this straight, he said, walking slowly toward her desk. You want me to pretend to be your husband, live in your house, play the part. But no. What? No touching, no feelings. Selene's eyes didn't waver. Exactly. And what if my daughter calls you Mom by accident? Selene exhaled softly but not unkindly. Then I suppose I'll have to figure out how to answer her. That silence again, heavier this time. Then Graham said quietly, You don't need a husband, Selene. You need a shield. A name next to yours that makes the men in your boardroom feel more comfortable. I'm not sure whether to be insulted or impressed. She tilted her head. You'd be surprised how much a name can still mean to them. I'm not surprised, he muttered. I just hoped you'd be better than that. Selene's expression didn't change, but something in her voice softened. I've learned to survive in a world built for men who believe women must be softened by marriage. This is survival, Mr. Whitaker, not desire. Graham ran a hand through his hair. His mind spun. 3 years. Financial security, medical care for Lila's heart condition, a way out of the constant hustling, the side jobs, the ramen dinners. And still, what would I be teaching my daughter, he said, that we trade ourselves for comfort? You'd be teaching her what sacrifice looks like, Selene replied, the quiet kind, the kind fathers make when no one's watching. That hit harder than he expected. He turned away again, exhaling through his nose. Why me, Selene? He asked more softly this time, honestly. She hesitated, then answered barely above a whisper, because you looked at me like I was a person. Not a prize, not a number, not a threat. Just a woman. Graham froze. He hadn't expected that. The room fell into silence again this time, thick with something unspoken. Outside, the sun had dipped behind the skyline, casting long, golden shadows across the floor. Then she walked toward the desk drawer, pulled out a folder, and laid it gently on the glass. Read it. Take 48 hours. If you don't sign, I'll have to find someone else. But I don't want someone else. I want someone who has nothing to gain except the life I can give his daughter." He didn't pick it up. Not yet. But he met her eyes. For the first time, really met them past the control, past the polish, and into something raw. "You don't trust easily, do you?" he said. "Trust," Celine whispered, "has never gotten me anything but broken." Graham glanced at the folder, then back at her. Then finally he asked, "Where's the pen?" It rained the night they moved in. Not a soft drizzle, but a steady, soaking curtain of rain that blurred the windows of the Carrington estate and soaked the soles of Graham's worn boots as he stepped out of the town car, Lila curled against his chest like a sleeping kitten. Celine stood in the doorway beneath the grand stone arch, dressed in slate gray, no umbrella, no expression. Her posture was perfect, untouched by weather, her arms folded like the world couldn't touch her and wouldn't dare try. "Welcome," she said simply. Graham didn't answer. He just carried his daughter inside, nodding politely at the staff who bowed slightly as they passed. No one looked at him twice. But one of the housekeepers, an older woman with warm eyes, gave Lila a blanket and whispered something in Spanish. The child smiled sleepily. That was the warmest thing in the house. 3 years passed like a winter with no end. They shared no bedroom, no dinners, no anniversaries. Just polite distance and the occasional photo op arranged by Celine's PR team. In public, she smiled slightly. He stood at her side like a monument. In private, they became ghosts, haunting the same corridors. Graham rose early every day, packed. Lila's school lunch walked her to the gates of the elite academy Celine had placed her in. He kept himself busy light maintenance work around the estate, helping Mrs. Ramirez in the garden, designing small freelance projects late into the night. Celine never asked about any of it, and she never asked about Lila. Not once. He told himself he didn't care. He had signed up for this. A contract, a clean deal. He didn't need her to pretend to be a mother. But sometimes late at night when he walked past her office and saw her still working under that harsh white light alone, always alone, he wondered if she even remembered there was a child sleeping 2 doors down. A child who had once asked, "Why doesn't she like hugs?" Then, one night, everything changed. Lila had been coughing for days, nothing serious. Graham thought just a cold, but by 2 a.m., her breath turned shallow, panicked, her lips tinged blue. "Lila, hey, sweetheart, breathe, look at me." Graham's voice cracked as he carried her down the hallway, blanket wrapped around her like a shield. He didn't think, just knocked hard on Celine's office door. She opened it almost instantly. Her eyes landed on the child in his arms, small, struggling to breathe, and for the first time in 3 years her composure cracked. "Is there a hospital on call?" he asked. "She's not breathing right." Celine didn't answer. She was already moving. Within minutes, a private medical team was summoned. Oxygen, IVs, monitors. All the things Graham could never afford on his own. Celine stood back, at first her arms stiff at her sides. But when the doctor turned to them and said, "She'll be okay," her heart just worked too hard with the fever. Something in her gave way. Graham noticed it in the way her hand trembled at her side. "Why didn't you call me sooner?" she asked. He looked at her, worn and shaken, cradling Lila's hand. "You made it clear she wasn't your concern." Celine flinched, then quietly, "That wasn't fair. She's a child. You know her name?" "Celine," he asked, voice low. Celine opened her mouth, closed it, then nodded. "Lila." Graham studied her for a long moment. "She calls you the lady with no smile." Celine's gaze dropped. That silence returned, heavy. More than just awkward, it was filled with all the things they hadn't said for 3 years. "Do you want me to leave?" he asked suddenly. "Take her. Walk away. We've held up our end." "No." Her voice was too fast, too firm. "Stay." Why? Celine stepped closer. Her eyes flicked to Lila, then back to him. "Because this house feels less empty when you're in it." It was the first real thing she had said to him. The next morning, Graham found Celine already downstairs. No makeup, hair pulled back, holding a cup of coffee in the kitchen, a place she never entered. "You don't have to be here," he said, not unkindly. "I couldn't sleep." Graham looked at her in silence, then asked, "Do you ever think about the fact that we live in the same house but we're complete strangers?" Celine didn't answer immediately. Finally, she said, "It's easier that way." For who she hesitated. For me. Graham stepped to the sink, filled a glass with water, sipped. 3 years, Celine. And not once did you ask about her school. Her drawings. The little stuffed fox she carries everywhere. "I'm not good with children," she said. "Or people. Or anything that feels." Graham looked at her. "Then, what are you good at?" Celine met his gaze. Surviving. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't proud. It was just honest. Maybe he said you don't have to survive anymore. Maybe. You can just live. Celine looked away, but her hand gripped the edge of the marble counter like the world had shifted beneath her feet. "You said this would be just a contract," she whispered. "No feelings." "Feelings weren't in the contract," Graham replied. "But life doesn't follow contracts, Celine. Especially when a little girl draws pictures of you and still hopes you'll smile back." That evening, as Lila slept peacefully for the first time in days, Celine stood at the threshold of the child's bedroom. She didn't step in, just watched from the doorway, then whispered to no one, "I don't know how to be what she needs." Behind her, Graham spoke gently. "Start by showing up." She didn't turn, but she nodded, and in that small nod was a crack. Not enough to let the light in, but maybe, just maybe enough to let it try. Graham found the envelope on the kitchen counter. He hadn't heard Celine come in as usual. She moved like a shadow in that house, silent, precise, untouched by the clutter of emotion. But the envelope was hers. He recognized the letterhead Carrington Group, Office of the CEO. He opened it carefully, expecting more legal paperwork, another amendment to the contract perhaps. But instead it was a formal invitation, heavy cardstock embossed gold. "You are requested to attend the 25th anniversary gala of Carrington Real Estate Group. Venue, the Whitmore Hotel, Saturday, 7:00 p.m. Dress formal. Attendance mandatory for all executives and spouses." There was a handwritten note at the bottom. "Graham, I need you there. Celine." He read it twice. She never writes, never asks, never needs. He walked upstairs, the invitation in his hand. Lila was sitting on the floor painting a scene of their small backyard, complete with a smiling sun and a tiny figure that looked suspiciously like Celine, standing next to a fox and holding a balloon. She looked up and grinned. "Daddy, guess what I drew her smiling today?" Graham crouched down. "Her Miss Celine," she whispered. "I think she wants to smile, but maybe she forgot how." That evening, Celine was in the study when he knocked. She looked up from her laptop, her hair pinned back, sleeves rolled up. For once, she didn't look like the bulletproof CEO. She looked tired. "You need something?" she asked. He held up the invitation. "Mandatory, huh?" Celine stood, walked around the desk. "I wouldn't have used that word if I had any other choice." He raised an eyebrow. "You always have a choice." "Not when the board is circling like vultures," she said, her voice tight. "They've been waiting for an opportunity to replace me with someone more palatable." "You mean male?" She didn't argue. "I've kept them at bay by appearing stable, married, controlled. But this gala is different. International partners, media coverage, one wrong step, and I'm just here to make sure you look properly domestic." Graham finished. She sighed. "I didn't mean it like that." "No." He stepped closer. "Then how did you mean it?" Her voice dropped. "I meant, I trust you, more than anyone else in that room." That silenced him. "I don't need you to pretend to love me," she said quietly. "Just don't make me look like I've failed at being human." Graham stared at her for a long moment, then asked, What do I wear? The gala was held at the Whitmore all-marble floors, chandeliers dripping with crystal and tuxedos as stiff as the egos wearing them. Graham hated every second of it. But Celine, she moved like she owned the air, dressed in a midnight blue gown that shimmered like falling stars, her hair down for once cascading in soft waves. But it wasn't the dress or the diamonds that turned heads. It was her stillness, her command. Everyone in the room either feared her or wanted to become her. And then there was Graham in a simple black tux, no cufflinks, no pretense. Just him, standing beside her like gravity. "You clean up well," she murmured. He glanced sideways. "I feel like I'm impersonating someone wealthier." "You're impersonating my husband," she replied, then paused. "But somehow tonight it doesn't feel like pretending." That stopped him cold. But before he could respond, someone called out, "Celine, Carrington, you finally brought the elusive husband." It was a man in his early 50s, tailored to within an inch of his life, holding a glass of scotch and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Graham Whitaker Celine said, introducing him with the ease of a practiced politician. "My husband." Graham shook the man's hand. Firm, calm. He'd dealt with men like this before, all charm and teeth. "Daniel Wexler," the man said. "Investor, board member, occasional thorn in your wife's side." "And here I thought you were just the entertainment," Graham replied evenly. Wexler chuckled. "He's got wit. I like him." "Don't let this one go, Celine." Celine offered a tight smile. "That's not the plan." They moved through the room, Celine greeting investors and executives, Graham observing silently, offering polite nods, but mostly watching her. The way her smile turned mechanical. The way her eyes darted, scanning, measuring, surviving. And suddenly he understood. All these years she hadn't been cold. She had been protecting herself. An hour later they stepped outside to the garden terrace for air. The city lights blinked below them. A soft wind tugged at Celine's hair. "You hate this," she said. "I do. You're good at faking it. I've had practice." She leaned against the stone railing, her profile lit by the gold spill of ballroom light. "This is the only world I've ever known. Money, deals, power games. You don't belong in it." He stepped beside her. "No, but maybe that's why you asked me here." Celine turned to him. "Why did you say yes?" "Graham, really?" He hesitated, then said, "Because my daughter needed medical care. Because I needed to stop drowning. Because I thought I could stay invisible." And now he looked at her. "You stopped being invisible the moment you stood up for a little girl who still believed you might smile." Her breath caught. "You think I'm unfeeling," she said. "No," he replied. "I think you're terrified. And I think no one ever told you that you don't have to be perfect to be worthy." Celine looked at him for a long time. Then, in the most unexpected moment of the night, she laughed. A real, soft, beautiful sound that broke something open inside both of them. "Say that again," she whispered. He leaned closer. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be real." They stood there in the quiet, and for the first time in 3 years, Celine Carrington didn't feel like she was performing. She felt seen, and maybe, just maybe, something else was starting to bloom. Something neither of them had expected. Something not in any contract. The applause echoed through the ballroom like distant thunder as Celine stepped onto the stage. She moved with flawless grace, her heels silent against the marble floor, her expression unreadable. Graham stood just behind the curtain, watching her silhouette beneath the soft wash of gold light. She was dazzling. And yet he saw something no one else in that room of power brokers and billionaires could see. A woman holding her breath. Celine reached the microphone. The crowd quieted instantly. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady, sculpted, "thank you for being part of a milestone in Carrington Real Estate's legacy. 25 years ago, my father built this company with vision and grit. Tonight, we honor not just that history, but the future we are building together. Polite applause. But she wasn't finished. I also want to thank my husband, Graham Whitaker, she added, her voice softening. He came into my life quietly without expectation or fanfare, and in doing so reminded me that stability is not weakness, and that silence doesn't always mean absence. Graham felt the words land like a stone dropped into still water, gentle but deep. There were a few surprised glances in the room, some whispers. He saw Evelyn Grant, one of Celine's oldest rivals on the board, narrow her eyes. But Graham didn't care. Because in that moment, Celine wasn't performing. She was revealing something real. Backstage, she exhaled as she stepped away from the podium, tension rolling off her shoulders like a coat she no longer wanted to wear. That was unexpected, Graham said as she joined him. I meant it, Celine replied, not looking at him. I don't say things I don't mean. No, he said, you just avoid saying the things that matter. She turned to him sharply, but before she could reply, a voice interrupted. Celine Evelyn said smoothly, approaching with a glass of champagne in one hand and ambition in the other. Lovely speech. Touching even. Celine's smile was poised. Evelyn. Evelyn turned her attention to Graham, eyes glinting. And this must be the mystery husband. You're much taller than I expected. And not what I pictured for Celine. I get that a lot, Graham replied evenly. Evelyn leaned in slightly. You know, I once asked Celine what kind of man could possibly keep up with her. She said, I don't need someone to keep up. I need someone to stay grounded while I fly. Celine's jaw tightened just slightly. You have an excellent memory. I do, Evelyn said. Then with a pointed glance at Graham, let's hope your husband has the stamina for the long haul. This world isn't kind to those who come in late. With that, she drifted away, a shark in silk. Graham watched her go, then turned to Celine. She doesn't like me. She doesn't like anyone she can't control. And I suppose I'm harder to manage than I look. Celine finally looked at him. You're the only person in my life who tells me the truth, even when I don't want to hear it. Is that a compliment? It's the highest one I know. Later that night, back at the estate, Graham undid his tie in the hallway while Celine stood at the window, still in her gown, arms folded. She didn't win tonight, he said. You did. Celine didn't answer right away. Then that speech. It wasn't part of the script. Graham turned. Then why'd you say it? She hesitated. Because something's changing, and I don't know what to do with that. He walked toward her, slow but sure. You don't have to do anything. Change doesn't need a 5-year plan, Celine. She almost smiled. You really are unlike anyone I've ever met. He stopped a few feet from her. Is that good or bad? It's terrifying. They stood in silence. The soft ticking of the hallway clock filled the space between them. Then Celine spoke again, this time quieter. When I was 16, my father told me love was a distraction, that emotions made women weak. He said if I wanted to survive in his world, I had to feel less, need less, want less. Graham's voice was steady. He was wrong. He was powerful. So are you, he said. But power doesn't mean shutting out the world. It means choosing who gets in. Celine turned to face him fully. And what if I choose wrong? You already did, Graham said gently. You married a stranger. Her lips twitched. Fair point. He took a step closer. But that stranger happens to know how to fix leaky sinks, make a mean grilled cheese, and tell bedtime stories on demand. She looked up at him. Her voice dropped. And he doesn't flinch when the CEO of Carrington Real Estate looks like she's about to fall apart. No, he said softly. He holds her steady. A long, unbroken pause. And then she stepped forward. Not far. Just enough. I didn't expect you to matter, she said. Not like this. I didn't expect to care, he replied. They stood there inches apart, the tension between them like a held breath. Then, soft, unsure, Selene reached up and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Then let's figure it out," he said. One small, human, terrifying step at a time. The next morning, as Graham packed Lila's lunch, she tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy." "Was Miss Selene happy last night?" Graham paused. "Why do you ask?" "Because—" I heard her laugh. He knelt in front of her, cupped her small face. "I think she's learning." Lila smiled wide. "Maybe she's remembering. Remembering what? That she used to be someone's little girl, too." Outside, Selene stood at her window watching them below. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a woman trapped in a tower. She felt like someone who might be ready to come down. And maybe she thought that's where the real power begins. The first time Selene felt it, she didn't recognize it. It was a slow burn in her chest. Not quite anger, not quite fear, but something sharp enough to steal her breath when she saw Graham standing outside the school gates. Smiling. Not just smiling. Laughing. With her. The woman was tall, elegant in a casual kind of way, jeans and a cream blazer hair swept into a carefree bun. She was holding Lila's hand, crouched to eye level, listening intently as the little girl pointed to something in her sketchbook. Graham stood beside them, easy and relaxed, sunlight hitting his face just right. Selene didn't realize she'd come to a full stop until her driver cleared his throat gently. "Ms. Carrington," she blinked. "Pull around," she said, sharper than intended. By the time she entered the house that evening, the feeling still hadn't left. It twisted deeper when she found the woman in her kitchen sitting at the island sipping tea, chatting with Mrs. Ramirez like she belonged. Graham looked up from the stove. "Hey, you're early." Selene's voice was too crisp, clearly not early enough. He frowned, confused, but before he could speak, the woman stood and offered a hand. "I'm Dr. Nora Avery," she said warmly. "Pediatric cardiologist. I've been working with Lila for the last few months at the center. Today was our follow-up." Selene froze. The center. She's been volunteering with the hospital program, Graham added. Art therapy on Fridays. She's really bonded with Lila. "I see," Selene replied flatly. Nora didn't seem to notice the chill. "Lila's doing beautifully. Her coloring's improved. She's sleeping better, too. You must be doing something right." Selene's throat tightened. "You. Not we." Nora smiled again, oblivious. "And Graham. He's a natural. Honestly, if I weren't careful, I'd be tempted to steal him for myself. It was a joke. A harmless, casual comment tossed like confetti. But Selene felt it like a slap. She turned to Graham. "May I speak with you?" "In private," she added, already walking toward the hallway. The door clicked shut behind them. "What was that?" Selene demanded. What Graham's brows pulled together? "That performance, the smiling, the charm. You looked like she stopped herself. Like what he pressed, like you belonged with her." Graham's voice was calm, but there was a hint of steel. "You asked me to show up for Lila." "I did. You never said I couldn't be kind while doing it." Selene crossed her arms. "You don't know her. You don't know what she wants. And you do." That hit harder than it should have. "She's your doctor," Selene said, voice tightening. "Not your friend. She's been helping Lila. And she's been kind. You don't get to police that." "I'm not." She stopped, breathed out. "I'm not used to this." To what? Graham asked gently. "Feeling something when someone else gets too close." Silence. "I'm not jealous," she said, but even she didn't believe it. Graham stepped forward, voice low. "Selene, you built a world where no one could touch you. But now that someone might be reaching for me, you suddenly care." She didn't look at him. "I'm not saying this to hurt you," he added, "but you don't get to claim the comfort of distance and the privilege of closeness at the same time." "That's not fair." Selene swallowed hard. "I don't know how to be fair." Graham's voice softened. "Then just be honest." Later that night, Celine stood outside Lila's room. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, she saw the little girl asleep, a worn stuffed fox tucked beneath her chin. Next to her, on the nightstand, was a small painting. It was of Celine, smiling, wearing the same dress from the gala. And beside her, holding her hand, was a little girl with yellow shoes just like Lila's. Below the painting was a scribbled caption in blocky letters. "Maybe she's learning to love." Celine's breath caught. She turned and nearly walked straight into Graham. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "About earlier?" He nodded once slowly. "You don't owe me perfection, Celine. Just effort." She looked at him, and for once the armor was gone. "What if effort isn't enough?" "It is," he said. "If it's real." They stood in silence again, softer this time. Then Celine said, almost a whisper, "She draws me smiling. She believes you will." "I don't remember the last time I smiled and meant it." "You did," Graham said. "At the gala." She looked up at him, eyes unsure. "You noticed, I notice everything." There was something in the way he said it, not as a man trying to impress, but as someone who'd earned the right to say it. Celine nodded slowly. "I'll try. Not just for Lila. For me." Graham smiled gently. "That's all I've been waiting for." In her room that night, Celine stared at the painting again. Maybe she's learning to love. The child didn't know the weight those words carried, but Celine did. And for the first time, she didn't run from them. She embraced them. Maybe love didn't arrive in grand declarations or stolen kisses. Maybe sometimes love began in the quiet jealousy of seeing someone else light up what you'd long forgotten how to touch. The past never knocks. It walks straight through the front door the moment you think you've locked it behind you. Celine hadn't thought about him in years, had trained herself not to. His name, once sharp as glass, had dulled into silence. But the moment she saw the envelope on her desk, thick, cream-colored, with no return address, her heart dropped like a stone into water. Inside was a single photo. Him, standing beside a sleek black car in Paris. Older, grayer, but unmistakably him, Julian Crane, and beneath the photo, scrawled in his handwriting, elegant mocking, "I hear you finally said, 'I do.' I wonder if it was love this time." Celine's fingers trembled slightly. The door creaked behind her. Graham stepped in holding a file from Lila's school. "They need this signed. Something about the parent volunteers." He stopped short when he saw her face. "What is it?" he asked. Celine didn't speak, just handed him the photo. Graham studied it for a moment. "Who is he? My past," she said quietly. "The worst part of it." Graham looked again. "Ex." She nodded. "Mentor. First investor. First man I trusted. And the first one who showed me how dangerous that could be." Graham waited. Celine took a breath. He believed emotions made people weak. That loyalty was leverage. He taught me everything about control, and used that knowledge to dismantle me piece by piece. When I finally left, I swore I'd never give anyone that power again. "And now, he's back," Graham said. She nodded. "He always reappears when I'm close to something real. Like he can sense it." That night, after Lila had fallen asleep, Celine poured herself a glass of wine and stood by the window in the dim light of the study. Graham entered quietly, not speaking, just waiting until she was ready. Finally, she said, "Do you know what he told me the day I walked away?" Graham shook his head. He said, "You'll never be more than what I made you. You're a shell with polish. You can imitate love, but you'll never feel it." Her voice cracked at the end, just slightly, like a hairline fracture in glass. "I've carried that voice in my head for a decade," she admitted. "It's the reason I built walls so high no one could see in. It's why I've looked in the mirror every morning and reminded myself that survival is the only goal." Graham moved beside her slowly. What if he was wrong? She looked at him. What if he wasn't? Then he wouldn't have sent a photo, Graham said. He would have shown up himself. Men like that don't write unless they're scared. Celine blinked, scared of being forgotten, of being replaced. She stared down at the photo again. Then, softly, he knew every part of me, and used all of it to wound me. Graham met her gaze. I know every scar you carry, and I haven't walked away. There was something fierce in his voice now. Not protective, present, grounded. I'm not him, he said, and you're not the woman who needed him. Silence fell again, but this time it was warm. Then Celine asked, Why haven't you walked away, Graham? He hesitated. Then, Because I see the parts of you you forgot were still alive. And I'm not here to fix you. I'm just here to stand beside you while you heal. Celine's throat tightened. What if I fail? Then I'll still be here tomorrow. A week passed. Julian didn't reappear, but the memory of him lingered like the scent of smoke after fire. Celine didn't retreat into herself, not this time. She began waking earlier, joining Graham and Lila for breakfast. At first, she said little, but one morning, as Lila showed her a crayon drawing of the three of them, Celine touched her daughter's hand gently and said, You're very talented. Lila's eyes widened. Do you really think so? Celine smiled. I wouldn't lie to an artist. That night, Graham found Celine in her office, not working, just sitting. A small photo album open in her lap. I found this in storage, she said. Pictures of me as a child. He sat beside her. One photo showed a girl with scraped knees and wild curls holding a popsicle in both hands, grinning with crooked teeth. She looks happy, Graham said. She was, Celine whispered, before the world taught her not to be. Graham didn't say anything. He just reached out and took her hand gently, letting silence do what words couldn't. A few nights later, Celine stood in front of her bathroom mirror brushing her hair. Her reflection looked softer lately. Still composed, but something new shimmered beneath the surface. She turned toward the door. Graham was there leaning against the frame, arms crossed. I need to ask you something, she said. Ask. Do you think someone like me can be loved for who I am, not for what I built? Not for my name. Just me. Graham's voice was firm. I already do. She took a step closer. And if I break again, he smiled softly. Then we rebuild. Together. The next morning, Celine walked into her office to find a box on her desk. No note, no label. Inside the photo Julian had sent, torn in half. She turned it over. On the back, scribbled in a different hand, one she knew all too well. He doesn't define you anymore. Graham had done it quietly. No show, no speech, just a small act that said everything she needed to hear. And for the first time in years, Celine Carrington cried. Not from pain, but from the realization that she wasn't alone anymore. It started with laughter. Real laughter from the kitchen, the kind that spilled through walls and made a house feel like home. Celine was barefoot, wearing one of Graham's flannel shirts over leggings, stirring pancake batter, while Lila sat on the counter, her feet swinging and nose dusted with flour. Graham flipped a pancake with dramatic flair, earning a delighted squeal from his daughter. Daddy's a chef and a ninja, Lila declared. Celine smirked. I'd settle for doesn't burn breakfast. Graham grinned. Don't jinx it. Celine leaned against the counter, watching them. She didn't say it out loud, but the moment carved itself into her memory. The simplicity, the closeness, the ordinary joy was something she'd once believed would never belong to her. But even the warmest kitchens can't keep out a storm. The first crack came that afternoon. Celine's executive assistant, Monica, buzzed into her home office with urgency in her voice. Celine, you'll want to see this. She forwarded the link. Carrington CEO's marriage under scrutiny sources. Say it's a business arrangement. There in bold type was Celine's name alongside a grainy photo of her and Graham at the gala, another of them walking near the estate, and the final blow, a paparazzi shot of Julian Crane arriving at a Manhattan hotel with a headline, Ex-Lover Returns amid CEO's scandal. Celine sat, frozen fingers clenched around the mouse. The article was full of half-truths, whispers from anonymous insiders speculating that Graham was paid, that Lila wasn't really his daughter, that the entire marriage was a front for PR. The worst part, they made it sound plausible. She barely noticed Monica's voice again. "We've received a statement request from 3 major outlets, and the board is restless." Celine closed the laptop and walked straight out. Graham was helping Lila with a puzzle when she found him. She didn't speak, just stood there, arms crossed, jaw tight. He looked up. "Everything okay? I need to talk to you," she said curtly. Lila blinked. "Are you mad?" "No, sweetheart," Graham said gently. "Go wash up for dinner. Okay?" When she was gone, Celine snapped, "Why didn't you tell me you spoke to Julian?" Graham's brows furrowed. "I didn't. He was photographed arriving in New York, and somehow 3 gossip outlets have full details about our arrangement. Even your background." Graham stood. "You think I talked to him?" "I think someone did," Celine said coldly. "And you're the only variable that wasn't tightly controlled." The words echoed in the silence. Graham looked at her, really looked at her. "So that's where we are now." "Back to suspicion I built this company from ashes," Celine said. "I've been lied to by people I trusted before. I won't let it happen again." "And what am I?" Celine Graham asked. "A threat to your empire or the man who's been raising your daughter like his own?" "That's not fair." "No," he cut in, voice suddenly sharp. "What's not fair is that I've done everything you asked, stood by, you protected your name, and still you look at me like I'm expendable." Her throat tightened. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did. Because somewhere deep down, you still believe love is a transaction. That trust is a luxury you can't afford." She blinked, and for the first time in a long time, Celine felt afraid. Not of him, of herself. Graham exhaled the fire in him, cooling to ash. "I can't teach you how to trust Celine, but I also can't keep proving I'm not the enemy." He turned to leave. "When you decide whether I'm your husband or your hired help, let me know." Celine stayed in her office long after dark. The house was too quiet. Even the distant hum of Lila's bedtime story had stopped. She stared at the screen, then at the ring on her finger. She remembered something Graham once said. "You stopped being invisible the moment you stood up for a little girl who still believed you might smile." Was she doing the same now, standing up for the terrified girl inside her, or pushing away the one man who saw her? It wasn't until midnight that she heard soft footsteps down the stairs. She opened the door to find Lila hugging her fox, blinking sleepily. "Can't sleep," the girl mumbled. Celine knelt. "Nightmare." "No," Lila said. I heard you fighting. Is Graham leaving us?" Celine's heart cracked. "No, baby. He's just upset." Lila looked up. "You make him happy, but he makes you warm." Celine's breath caught. "Don't let the warm go away," Lila whispered. Then she hugged her tightly, so tightly it felt like forgiveness. The next morning, Graham stood at the kitchen counter packing Lila's lunch. His movements were quiet, measured, not angry, just resigned. Celine stepped in still in her silk robe, barefoot. He glanced at her. "I'll be gone most of the day. Got some work lined up in Midtown." She didn't speak until he turned to leave. "I believe you." He stopped. "I believe you didn't leak anything. And I believe you would have told me if you'd seen Julian." Graham turned slowly. "That belief came overnight." "No," Selena said, voice trembling. "It came after I realized something scarier than being wrong." "What's that?" "Being right, and losing you anyway." He stared at her, then asked gently, "What do you want?" "Celine." She swallowed. "I want a life where I don't have to question the people who love me. I want to be the kind of woman who doesn't burn every bridge she builds, and I want to come home to you. Not the version of you in a contract, but the man who makes my daughter laugh and reminds me I'm still human." Graham exhaled slowly. I can't promise I won't mess up, she added, but I can promise I won't run. There was a long silence. Then Graham said, "That's the first real thing you've ever said to me." Celine stepped closer. "Then let me say one more." She reached for his hand. "I need you. Not because of a deal. Not because of Lila. Just because you're the first man who ever stayed when I wasn't perfect." His hand closed around hers, and for the first time there was no business between them, only breath, and hope, and something real. Celine had faced boardroom mutinies, hostile takeovers, and lawsuits that could have sunk empires. But nothing prepared her for the feeling of standing in the middle of her glass-walled office. As the very company she built from the ground up turned its gaze on her like a jury. 12 men and women, some she'd mentored, some she'd outmaneuvered, all now watching her with guarded eyes. Miss Carrington began. Harold Whitmore, the board's elder statesman. "We've reviewed the press fallout, the investor panic, and the letters we've received from 3 major stakeholders." Celine nodded once fingers clasped, spine straight. "And, effective immediately, the board is calling for a vote of confidence. Pending the outcome, we may consider temporary executive suspension for the good of the company's public image." The words hit harder than she expected, not because of pride, but because for the first time she saw how fragile power truly was. She glanced across the table. No one met her eyes. Except Dana Lynn, the youngest board member, barely 32, fierce, brilliant, and one of the few who still spoke her mind. Dana leaned forward. "Before we take a vote, I want to hear her speak. No statements, no lawyers. Just Selena." Celine looked around the room, every breath a battle. Then she rose. "You all know what I've done for Carrington Holdings," she said. "You've watched me bleed for it, shield it, rebuild it after the fire in 17. I've missed funerals, family, friends. Everything. For this place." She paused. "But I made one mistake. I forgot that building an empire doesn't mean much if no one's waiting at home to share it with you." A few brows lifted. "I married a man who didn't come from this world. Not for optics, not for strategy, but because he reminded me I was still alive, that there was something outside of quarterly earnings and controlled headlines." Her voice steadied. "Did we sign a contract at first? Yes. Out of fear. Out of broken trust I hadn't yet learned how to repair. But everything after that, everything real, was built without lawyers." She met each gaze now, steady, unflinching. "You can vote to suspend me. You can call this damage control, but I promise you Carrington will survive, not because we hide behind PR spin, but because we finally tell the truth." A silence settled in. Then Dana spoke softly. "I vote to keep her." They voted, and by a razor-thin margin, 5-4 with 3 abstaining, Celine stayed. But it wasn't victory. It was a warning shot. That evening, Celine stood at the edge of the garden behind the estate. The air smelled of lavender and ozone, a storm clearly brewing beyond the hills. Graham stepped out, hands in his pockets. "Heard about the vote." She didn't turn. "I stayed by 1 vote. 1. That's how thin the line is between legacy and exile." He moved beside her. "Do you regret it?" "No," she said, "but I'm starting to wonder what I've really built, a company that can outlive me, or a cage that I've gilded so well I forgot it was a prison." Graham looked at her, then asked gently, "And if it was the cage, what would you do?" She exhaled. "I'd choose the door, even if it meant leaving everything I once believed was mine." He said nothing, just let the words breathe in the wind. Then Celine asked, "When you first saw me, what did you see?" Graham didn't hesitate. A woman trying not to drown in a pool she built herself. She nodded slowly. "And now, a woman who's finally swimming toward the shore." Her eyes glistened. "I don't want to go back to the woman who needed armor to feel safe." "Then don't," he said simply. "Choose love over legacy. Choose life over legend. She looked at him, something ancient and tender stirring in her chest. I think I'm ready to stop surviving, she whispered. I think I want to live. Later that night, as Lila tucked herself under her blanket, Celine came to sit beside her. Did you know? Celine said softly that when I was your age I thought grown-ups had all the answers. Lila giggled. You don't. Celine smiled. I'm still figuring them out. Lila looked at her seriously. Is that why you cried last night? Celine blinked. You saw that you thought I was sleeping. But I saw. I didn't say anything. Celine took her daughter's hand. Sometimes grown-ups cry because they realize they've been walking in the wrong direction, and they're afraid to turn around. Did you turn around? I'm trying, she said, but it's easier with you and your dad beside me. Lila snuggled in closer. Then we'll walk with you, even if you're scared. By midnight, Celine stood in her office looking at the glass walls that once made her feel powerful. Now they felt transparent, vulnerable. She picked up her phone. Dialed. Julianne, she said when the line connected. A pause. Then his smooth voice. Celine, I thought you'd lost my number. I didn't call to reminisce, she said coolly. I called to say this: you don't get to define me anymore. You don't get to haunt me through headlines or photos. You don't get to watch from the shadows and smirk. Julian chuckled. Is this the part where you declare your rebirth? No, she said. This is the part where I tell you I found something you never had, something you were too hollow to understand. And what's that family? Real love. And the strength to burn everything down, and still walk away with my soul intact. She ended the call, didn't wait for his response, because for once his voice didn't matter. She returned to the bedroom. Graham was already there, half asleep, one arm over the empty side of the bed. She climbed in, curled beside him. He stirred. Everything okay, Selena whispered. I let go tonight, of the fear, the story, the past. His voice was low, warm. What's left? She smiled into the darkness. Me, and the people who chose to stay. The rain had rolled in gently that morning, tapping at the windows like fingers urging the world to slow down. It was a Sunday, quiet, overcast, with the kind of stillness that made even clocks tick softer. Celine loved days like these, or at least she was learning to. Graham was on the living room floor helping Lila build a cardboard fort. She watched them from the stairs for a while, the easy rhythm of their laughter, the sound of tape unspooling Lila's voice bubbling with excitement. Then Lila said something that made Celine stop mid-step. Wait, I want to add Mommy's box. Graham looked up. What box, sweet pea? Lila disappeared for a moment, then came back holding a small floral tin, something Celine had never seen before. She cradled it like treasure. This one, she said proudly. Mommy gave it to me before the hospital. She told me it was our secret. Graham's expression shifted. Sweetheart. Where did you keep this? In my closet, Lila said. Behind the big books. I didn't want to forget her. Celine came down slowly. Can I see it? Lila hesitated, then nodded and opened the tin. Inside were a few crumpled drawings, a faded Polaroid, and a folded piece of paper with childish scrawl on it. Graham picked up the Polaroid. It was a picture of a woman, brunette, mid-30s, with tired eyes but a warm smile, holding a tiny Lila on her lap. On the back, in faded ink, Nora and Lila, Spring Picnic 2019. Celine froze. Graham read the name out loud. Nora! Lila beamed. That's my first mommy. A silence fell like a stone in still water. Celine knelt beside Lila. Baby, do you remember what happened to her? Lila nodded solemnly. She got sick. The nurses said she was going to sleep forever. Celine's throat tightened. And this box, it was from her. She gave it to me the day before she went to the hospital. She said if I ever feel scared, I could open it and remember that she loved me no matter what. Celine felt her vision blur. Graham carefully unfolded the crayon drawing. It showed 3 figures, Lila in the middle, holding hands with 2 women. One labeled Mommy Nora, the other, Mommy Celine. Celine stared at the name, written in bright purple crayon under a smiling figure with long blonde hair. "She already gave you that title," Graham said quietly. Celine's voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't know she saw me that way." "She did," Graham replied, "long before you believed it yourself." Later that night, Celine sat in her study with the tin beside her. She unfolded the last paper, a note clearly written by Nora. Faint but legible. "To whoever finds this. If something happens to me and you're reading this, please love her. She's more than sunshine. She's the whole sky. She gets sad sometimes like I do, but she hides it better. Teach her it's okay to cry. Let her be loud. And if you're someone she chooses to trust, hold that gently. It means more than you know. And if you're another woman like me, then thank you. Because love, real love, doesn't care about titles. It just wants a place to grow." With all my heart, Nora Celine folded the letter with shaking hands. She hadn't expected this. Not today. Not ever. That night, after Lila had gone to bed, she found Graham sitting on the porch sipping tea, listening to the rain. She sat beside him, wordless, for a long time. Finally, she said, "She was brave." He looked over. She was. I was jealous of a ghost I never met." Graham said nothing. "I was so busy trying to earn Lila's love on my terms, I didn't see she'd already given it. I was waiting for a title I didn't realize I already had." Graham looked at her carefully. "And now, I don't want to be just Celine anymore," she said quietly. "I want to be her mother, in every sense." He reached for her hand. "Then be." She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Do you think she'd be proud of Lila?" "Always. Of you, absolutely." Celine let that settle into her heart. "I used to believe love was something to be earned," she said. "A transaction, a performance. And now I know it's something to be trusted, something to protect, and sometimes something to inherit." Graham smiled. "Sounds like a family to me." The next morning, Lila bounced into the kitchen with a big grin. "Guess what I did?" Celine turned from the stove. "What, I changed the name on the fort." Graham raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I wrote Lila's house," before she said proudly, holding up a fresh sign made of paper and glitter. "Now it says, Our Home." She taped it up above the pillow door with careful pride. Celine crouched down beside her. "That's beautiful," Lila beamed. "Because homes aren't just where you sleep. They're where people choose you." Celine hugged her tightly, whispering, "Thank you for choosing me." Lila grinned. "You were always in my picture." That evening, Celine took the floral tin from her office and walked into Lila's room. She placed it gently on the shelf above her bed. "I think this belongs here now," she said. Lila tilted her head. "But isn't it Mommy Nora's yes?" Celine said. "And that's why it should stay with the girl she loved most." She touched the box, then turned to Celine. "Will you read me a story tonight? I'd love to." She opened the book slowly, her voice soft, steady. And as Lila drifted off, curled in her blankets, Celine glanced at the shelf again. 2 names, 2 legacies. 1 child loved completely. The boardroom was quiet. Too quiet. Celine stood at the head of the long marble table, her fingers resting lightly on the glass surface. Outside, the Manhattan skyline burned gold in the setting sun, but in here the air was still and electric, as if something immense was about to fall. She took a breath, not for courage, for clarity, because for once she wasn't here to fight. "I'm stepping down as CEO of Carrington Holdings." A ripple of shock tore through the room. Chairs shifted, mouths opened. Silence broke all at once. "What, you can't? This is premature." Celine think carefully. She raised a hand, calm but final. "I've thought carefully for the past 12 years, she said. Built this company with everything I had. I've negotiated billion-dollar mergers on no sleep. Smiled through funerals. Worn armor so long I forgot what my own skin felt like. And somewhere along the way I started mistaking survival for purpose. Dana Lynn leaned forward wide-eyed. Celine, you are Carrington. You are the brand. I was, Celine said. But the brand isn't the legacy I want to leave behind. She looked out the window for a long moment, then turned back. I want to build something that doesn't need walls and market share to feel like it matters. I want to raise a daughter who sees her mother as more than a headline, and I want to stop measuring my worth by the size of my schedule. Whitmore composed, as always asked, "Is this about Graham?" Celine didn't flinch. No, this is about me. He just reminded me that I exist outside of spreadsheets and press releases. She glanced at the portraits lining the wall, her father's among them, stoic and cold. I inherited this company because I was the only one ruthless enough to save it. But maybe the next person doesn't need to be ruthless. Maybe they just need to believe people matter more than numbers. Dana whispered, almost reverently. You're really doing this. Celine smiled. Letting go isn't the same as giving up. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do. That night, she walked into the Carrington penthouse one last time. Not as CEO. Just Celine. She wandered through the space, the polished floors, the towering windows, the cold beauty that once made her feel invincible. She touched the leather armchairs, the untouched piano, the framed awards on the walls. But none of it felt like her anymore. Until she reached her father's study. The door creaked open. It smelled like old books and older grief. Celine stepped in, lit a small lamp, and opened the bottom drawer of his desk. She hadn't been here since the funeral. Inside, dusty and forgotten, was a letter. For Celine, when the weight becomes too much. Her breath caught. Hands trembling, she opened it. My dearest Celine, if you're reading this, then I've already left you with too many burdens. I'm sorry for that. I raised you like a soldier because that's how I survived. But I fear I taught you to fight so well you forgot how to rest. If I could do one thing over, it would be to show you that strength doesn't always mean winning. Sometimes it means letting someone else carry you for a while. You are more than this company. You are more than my shadow. Go find what makes you feel alive, even if it's not in this tower. And know this, I was proud of you long before you ever sat in this chair. Love, Dad. Celine sat still for a long time, tears falling silently onto the page. For years, she had carried his silence like a punishment. Now she saw it for what it was, a man who didn't know how to say what he felt until it was too late. She folded the letter carefully and let the silence soften. Back at the estate, Graham was rocking on the porch swing, Lila asleep upstairs. The scent of chamomile tea drifted on the breeze. He looked up as Celine stepped out barefoot, hair-loose face, bare of armor. You're early, he said. I quit, she replied, sitting beside him. He blinked. You're serious, I gave the crown back, she said softly. And I didn't shatter. Graham reached for her hand. How does it feel? Like I finally came home to myself. They sat in silence for a moment, then she added, There's something else. I found a letter. From my father. His brow lifted. He said he was proud of me. Even before I took the job. Graham smiled. Sounds like he knew you better than you thought. Maybe, Celine said. Or maybe he just wanted me to know I didn't have to earn love to deserve it. She looked at him, voice thick with emotion. That's what you've taught me. And Lila. And Nora. Graham nodded. I used to think love made you soft, she whispered. Now I know. It makes you real. Later that night, as they lay in bed, Graham turned to her. So what? Now Celine smiled. Now I find out what kind of life I can build that has nothing to do with power. He chuckled. That sounds terrifying. Terrifying, she echoed. And finally worth it. Then she leaned in and kissed him, not because she was expected to, not because it was part of some script, but because for the first time she wanted something not as a reward, but as a gift. And when their foreheads touched, Celine whispered, "Thank you for loving the parts of me I hadn't met yet." Graham closed his eyes. "Thank you for finally coming home." The sky was painted in soft pastels, lavender streaks against fading gold, the kind of twilight that made the world feel like it was holding its breath. In the backyard of the Carrington estate, paper lanterns swayed gently in the breeze. A small group of friends and family gathered under strings of lights, laughter mingling with the hum of distant crickets. It wasn't a grand wedding. There were no photographers, no champagne fountains, no headlines waiting to be written. Just a little girl in a white cotton dress running barefoot across the grass, and two people who had finally learned how to stay. Celine stood at the edge of the garden barefoot, like Lila, her dress simple but elegant hair down in soft waves. She wasn't wearing diamonds, just a bracelet Lila had made out of wooden beads, each one painted with a tiny heart. Graham walked toward her tie, loosened smile, unguarded. "You sure about this?" he teased gently. Celine nodded. "For once in my life." "Absolutely." Lila came bounding up to them with a paper bouquet in her hands. "You forgot your flowers." Celine crouched down. "Did you make these?" "Yep," Leela said proudly, "and I spelled both your names right this time." Graham grinned. "That's a first. Daddy." He laughed, lifting her up and spinning her once before setting her down between them. "Ready to officiate, little miss?" he asked. "I was born ready," Lila declared with authority. They stood in a loose circle, just Celine, Graham, Lila, and a few loved ones watching with tears in their eyes and smiles that came from the soul. Lila cleared her throat dramatically and opened a notebook. "Okay, you two. Say your promises." Graham looked at Celine. "I promise to keep learning how to love you not the way the world expects, but the way you need. I promise to protect the quiet between us. And I promise to always be the guy who remembers your coffee order even when you forget your own name." Lila giggled. "Good one." Then he turned serious. "And I promise to love your daughter not just as mine but as ours. Because that's what she's always been, and what she'll always be." Celine's voice shook when she began. "I promise to let you in even on the days when I want to close every door. I promise to listen. Really listen. And not just wait to reply. I promise to hold your hand when you doubt yourself and remind you who you are when the world forgets." She looked at Lila. "And I promise to be your mother. Not just in name, but in every scraped knee, every drawing, every dream. I promise to show up even when I'm tired, even when I'm scared, because loving you is the easiest truth I've ever known." Lila beamed. "You may now hug the bride." Everyone laughed as Graham pulled them both into a tight embrace Lila squished between them. And for a moment, time didn't move. It stood still to honor them. Later that evening, Celine sat on the porch swing, a cup of tea in hand, watching fireflies drift across the garden. Graham joined her, their shoulders brushing. "Didn't think I'd ever be part of something like this," he murmured. Celine leaned into him. "Me neither. You know," he added, "you didn't just leave the company. You left an empire." She nodded. "And I thought I'd feel lost without it." He looked at her. "And do you?" She turned to face him fully. "No, because I didn't lose anything. I traded up." He smiled. "For what a home," she whispered. "One that doesn't need walls to keep the world out. Just people who choose each other. Every day." Inside, Lila was asleep in her room, arms wrapped around her stuffed rabbit. On the nightstand sat the floral tin Nora's box with a fresh edition, a photo of the three of them taken earlier that evening taped to the inside of the lid. Lila had written one word beneath it in bold crayon: family. The next morning, sunlight spilled into the kitchen as Celine made pancakes badly, but with enthusiasm. Graham was reading the paper, his glasses sliding down his nose. Lila sat at the counter, swinging her legs, narrating the weather in a British accent. Celine flipped a pancake directly onto the floor. Graham deadpanned brilliant technique. She threw a dish towel at him. Lila giggled. Mommy's gonna need pancake lessons. And in that imperfect kitchen surrounded by laughter, dishes, and love, Celine felt something she hadn't known she was missing. Peace. Not the kind that comes when the world goes silent, but the kind that comes when your soul stops running. That evening, she wrote a letter of her own. To herself. To the girl she used to be. You didn't fail. You just outgrew the life that once fit you. Power never made you whole. But love did. Real, messy, inconvenient, glorious love. You are not a title. You are not the pain that built you. You are a woman who chose to be soft when the world told her to be steel. And that is your legacy. And now I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Whether you're in a quiet town or a busy city, your story matters too, and your presence here means the world. If this story touched your heart or made you believe just a little more in love, healing, or second chances, please let us know in the comments. What was your favorite moment? What line stayed with you? And if you enjoy meaningful stories like this full of depth, emotion, and humanity, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next chapter of hope. Thank you truly for spending your time with us. Until next time, take care of your heart and never stop believing in the quiet magic of love.